I was thinking, what if we did like a cold open, Andrew? Like, what if this was the beginning of the podcast? Like right now, like we're recording. This is the episode. People can hear this.
Like us just talking for a minute, just like
off
the cuff.
We're classically an improv podcast. I mean, yeah, there's always some point where we're just kind of catching up on things. Especially now, I haven't talked to you, as we said, for record all year. We just had this little hiatus, and now we're back at it.
I'm allowing you to make that we haven't talked all year joke because I know you have 2 children. So I'm allowing it because of the presence of the fact you have kids. Just want you to know that if you didn't, I would be shaming you right now very heavily. No, I think
what's great
fine.
Is I've made it twice in our conversation because I had to do it again.
Keep bringing it up, and I'm not going to lie to you. It frustrates me because I heard you the first time. I
won't make the joke again until next year.
I don't believe you.
Yeah, you're probably right. But yeah, I've heard of the podcast that these it's cold opens. Doesn't start just with music or whatever. So I figured we could do that, and then we could say the magic words when it's time to wrap up, and it'll move on to the next segment.
The magic words.
Theme song.
They're not talking about the tower.
It feels so good to be back.
They're not talking about the We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts, we have the best of the rest.
Hello and welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined as always by my Shark Wrangler co-host Andrew Williams. Andrew, say hi to the listeners.
Hello.
Each week we take a second look at a movie that was poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Big Animal Month, and this week we are talking the 1999 film Deep Blue Sea. Andrew, I am stoked for everything. I'm happy to be back. I'm happy to finally be doing Big Animal Month. And I'm so happy to talk about Deep Blue Sea, a movie that I have always been very fond of, but have not rewatched in quite some time. We will talk about it, Andrew. But welcome back officially.
Yes.
Big
Exciting
Animal
times,
Month.
man.
Finally. This has been on the docket ever since we stopped doing comic book movies. We're like, yeah, we got these Big Animal Month or Big Animal movies together. And what's funny is we have the lineup. If you want to see the whole lineup, join us on Discord. We'll share it with you there. I don't know that they're all big animals, but I still want to call it Big Animal Month because it's so fun to say. Andrew, what is your history? You have to yell. I don't know about you, but I have to say it big. It's big. It's Big Animal Month. So you gotta get it out. You gotta have the energy.
Do you mind if I try?
Give it a shot, Andrew.
Big Animal Month.
Yes, that's perfect. I love it. Look forward to that all month long. Andrew, what is your history with this movie, Deep Blue Sea? Did you see this one in theaters?
No. I did not. This would have been July of 99, so I would have been turning 12. So don't get me wrong, this probably should have been right up my wheelhouse, but I don't know that my appreciation for the giant, big animal, had really set in yet. And I think I came to this one later. Obviously, after it kind of got memed, kind of got turned into like a little bit of a pop culture thing. Kind of came back around to it, had to watch it to kind of see all that stuff for myself. But did not see it at the time, came to it later. Can't say it's something I go back to a lot. Obviously, the Big Shark, there's some really, really famous Big Shark movie that kind of takes the top spot for a lot of people. And if they're going to go back and rewatch it, a giant shark movie, they typically go back to that one. And by that, I mean Sharknado 4. But
the gold standard, as it were. That's the subtitle of the movie. Sharknado for the gold standard.
The gold standard. That's about, the sharks are made of gold for some reason. Makes them really heavy and more dangerous. But don't steal that idea, sci-fi. You got to pay us if you want to take that. So no. Obviously, like, I've seen it. Don't go back to it very often, but it definitely did worm its way into culture in a kind of strange way in the late 90s, early aughts there when it came out.
I saw this movie in theaters. I saw it with my grandparents, this came out in the summer. I was staying with them probably for like a week, and they took me to the movies. We saw Deep Blue Sea. I remember talking about it with my grandpa afterwards, who notoriously, he was always responsible for renting the movies at Blockbuster whenever we were staying over there. And he's famous for renting just the worst movies you've never heard of. He just reads at the back of the box. Oh, that sounds interesting. And we end up watching Head of the Family, which is not like a mafia movie. It's about this guy with a very large head, like it's strapped into a chair. It's a weird one. But he would rent horrible movies. They were always awful. We always sat through them, and then we let him rent movies again the next time. I remember him talking about this movie, Deep Blue Sea, and him like laughing about how the basically he was making fun of the CG in the movie, which we'll get to, and how it holds up or not. But he's like, the people just look like rag dolls, which I don't know. Maybe that's how you would actually look if you're getting attacked by a 25-foot shark, Grandpa. But I digress. I saw this in theaters. I liked it at the time. I think 99. This has got to be my introduction to Thomas Jane, because I was in theaters in 1999 and was a big fan of the guy ever since. When Punisher comes out, I'm like, hey, that's the guy. It's the Shark Wrangler from Deep Blue Sea. After he worked with Frank Darabont in The Mist, whenever Frank Darabont was doing The Walking Dead, Thomas Jane was my fan cast for Rick Grimes. Andrew Lincoln did a great job, but I gotta say my opinion hasn't changed. I really wish he would have been there in that role, but getting ahead of myself again. We'll come back around to Thomas Jane talk, but I saw this in theaters. I've seen it a few times since then. I think my appreciation for it has grown over time, because like I loved it. I was like, oh yeah, that was fun. And then I certainly went through, snobby phases as we do, and I don't have time for a corny shark movie. But Andrew, 25 years later, I've seen a lot of shark attack movies. A lot of bad ones. #PP is it's unbelievable how many bad shark movies there are out there. This is one of the best of that crop, you know what I mean? It's one of the best shark attack movies not named Jaws,
Yeah, I mean, it's probably definitely, unironically, one of the most known shark movies beyond Jaws. Like, it's definitely, like, I think it might be number 2 right after Jaws. I can't think of, like, any giant shark. I mean, obviously there's Jaws sequels, but, like...
Sharknado. I mean, you mentioned Sharknado jokingly, but as far as cultural awareness, people know Sharknado. But I think more people know the name Sharknado than I've actually watched Sharknado, so that's a whole other thing. But, yeah, top-tier shark attack movie for sure. Andrew, let's set the stage a little bit here. This movie is released July 28th, 1999. My favorite year in film. It's made on a budget of $60 million. At the box office, it brings in $165 million. Pretty good hit for the summer. Critically, it's got decent reviews. It holds a 60% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. Nothing glowing, but it certainly had its defenders at the time and still to this day. Andrew, this is what I was shocked to see, though. 39% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. We've said it many times. It's rare. It's rare for the audience score to be lower than the critics on any movie. But something like this, I'm shocked that it's so low. Who's taken the time out of their day to go back and put a negative review in for a Shark Attack movie from 1999? I don't get it.
I don't either. It is odd. I like that genuinely surprised me too. Like I figured the audience score for this was going to be like higher, like 75,
70s, yeah, for sure,
but like high 60s at least. When I saw it, I was like, oh, it's 39. I was like, oh wow, like, and it's like off of 250,000 ratings. So like this is not like 18 people critic or audience reviewed Deep Blue Sea, and just all the haters are in there, but. Apparently all the haters are 250,000 strong that all said this is bad. And you know what? You're allowed to think that, but maybe what you really need to think about is a question I want to ask you, and that's you should be ashamed of yourself.
Andrew, you often say, whenever you see some like really bad hot takes on Reddit, movie takes, people that, hold up 3 or 4 directors as the pinnacle, and just have really bad hot takes. You'll often say, I'm begging you, see more movies. Like, just broaden your horizon. That's kind of how I feel about people giving this movie a negative review on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm begging you, see more shark movies. Watch more Shark Attack movies.
Have I told you what spurned my original usage of that statement?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
So it was obviously the age of the internet, the age of TikTok, the age of everything has created a vast array of film podcasts. And I joked about it earlier, but just the idea that it's just a bunch of guys kind of meandering aimlessly talking about pop culture for a couple hours. There's one in particular, they're Marvel guys for sure. They're the guys that were like when like the whole Martin Scorsese versus Marvel thing was going on, we're trying to argue that there were like Marvel movies better than Scorsese movies, which it's a pointless debate, first and foremost. It's one of those things where it's like you're stupid even engaging in it. But they had a separate, wholly unrelated debate once where they were talking about the greatest horror franchise of all time. I would like you to guess what their argument. They had each whittled it down to their personals. I don't want you to try and guess what they were.
Okay, horror franchises. Scream. It's pretty well known. Scream on there? No, okay. Halloween?
This is the final two. The two that they're arguing are the greatest horror franchises of all time.
The Conjuring?
That is one of them. The Conjuring verse.
Right. 2 greatest of all time. So they're probably not saying The Exorcist, because that's... No,
not the Exorcist franchise.
Is it Insidious?
No.
Paranormal Activity. All right, Andrew, what is it?
Saw. There are for what the greatest horror franchise of all time was the Conjuring verse versus Saw. And when I heard that, the only thing that echoed through my brain was, I'm begging you, watch more movies. Because if that's where you land on what the greatest horror franchise of all time is, you need to watch more movies.
It's not even, we probably sound pretty snobby to some people, and it's not like, LOL, your taste is bad.
Like, I love the first Conjuring movie.
I have nothing against either of those franchises, really. But like you said, if those are the 2 greatest of all time, you're overlooking...
You've got Scream, you've got Evil Dead, you've got Halloween. Like, there's a lot of stuff in there with, like, genuinely great entries beyond, like, the solid... Anyway, it's... like you said, it sounds a little snobbish, but the point is less that these franchises aren't enjoyable, they're not even good at times. It's just that if that's where you land for the best, one, it's like huge recency bias. Like, that's another problem that I kind of have with it. Like, those are 2 like so fresh franchises. Like, there's so much classic stuff out there that just gets lost in that discussion. And this isn't even going into like Dracula as a franchise or whatever, but just that idea that like I'm going to have a debate about film and do that without having seen a movie more than 20 years old. And it's like, okay, don't do that.
This movie, Deep Blue Sea, we're talking about today, is written by Duncan Kennedy and then Donna Powers and Wayne Powers. So the story originates with Duncan's script, and all of these credited writers, Andrew, I'm not finding a lot about them as I'm looking into this movie. Duncan Kennedy would later, I saw he was credited with the film Bait in 2012, which is also a shark movie. Bring the Deep Blue Sea guy in to punch up this script. That script originally written by alum of the show, our old pal, Russell Mulcahy. And that's about all I could find on Duncan. Donna and Wayne Powers, who were a writing team and married at the time, they would find arguably greater success a few years later with The Italian Job, the very successful remake from 2003. But kind of like Duncan, beyond a couple credits, I'm not seeing anything.
You were only supposed to blow the bloody doors off. Is not from The Right Italian Job. I'm sorry.
I haven't seen either one, so no matter what, you sound crazy to me.
That was my Michael Caine, folks, and now you know why I don't do impressions. Yeah, looking at Donna and Wayne Powers, like a lot of television. There's episodes of The Equalizer in here, Mancuso FBI, things like that in the late '80s, early '90s, and then ultimately we have this this kind of run here where they have Deep Blue Sea. They do a couple of little things here and there, and then they obviously all end up getting credits on the Deep Blue Sea sequels, which they only get like based on characters created by. There are 2 direct-to-video Deep Blue Sea sequels, so I wish those people that reviewed the first one badly would watch those. Yeah, not a lot of information here. It looks like The Italian Job is kind of the biggest thing that the Powers family ends up going on to, but other than that, not a lot of high profile stuff here. This is definitely as big as it gets for Duncan for sure, and it's definitely one of just a couple highlights for the others, but interesting.
The same cannot be said for our director, Rennie Harlan, who has a pretty nice run in the 80s and 90s. Breaks through with A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, which isn't the high point of the series or anything, but it's a well-known franchise. Goes on to direct Die Hard 2, another entry in a well-known franchise. And then perhaps his biggest hit is Cliffhanger in 1993, starring my boy Sylvester Stallone, which that movie hasn't really stuck around in the zeitgeist, but was huge back in the day. I think the opening to Ace Ventura 2 is more well-known than Cliffhanger at this point. I think people watch that movie and don't know the entire thing because it's a parody of Cliffhanger. But like I said, it's a pretty good run in the 90s. There's The Long Kiss Goodnight, where I think is where he first works with Samuel L. Jackson. After this movie, career trails off a little bit. He does Driven, another film with Stallone, but that one pretty much flops at the box office. Exorcist, The Beginning,
Woof.
12 Rounds, starring John Cena. Back when John Cena was a wrestler who acted, not an actor who wrestled. And then, interesting though, Andrew, I want to ask you about this. He's listed as the director for The Strangers, Chapter 1, 2, and 3, which
Yes.
1 has been released, 2 and 3 are in post-production. Did they shoot them all at the same time? I feel like you brought these movies
They
up on the
did.
podcast before. I don't recall why.
They did shoot them all together. I like how you just blew right past arguably the most famous thing he's done, which is Die Hard 2.
I definitely listed Die Hard 2, Andrew. You must
like,
have
don't focus
tuned
on it
out.
whatsoever. You said Cliffhanger was the most famous thing he's done. I don't know. I think that's
I-
Die Hard 2.
Yeah, but what made more money at the box
Some
office,
interesting.
Andrew?
That's probably, I don't know. Cliffhanger
see.
made 255. Die Hard made 240. So about the same.
There you go.
Adjusting
There
for
you go.
inflation, whatever. Long Kiss Goodnight is an interesting movie. It's written by Shane Black. It's kind of right before. It's kind of after Shane Black's first rise and fall. This is comes a little bit later, but it's pretty good. But anyway, yeah, I do not remember why I mentioned The Strangers Chapter 1. Were we talking about Rennie Harlan for some reason? I don't think so.
No, I think you said it was weird because it sounds like it's a reboot, but it's not, or something like that. Its relation to the other movies you said was very strange.
It's
or it's a remake that's by the number or something like that.
My favorite part of The Strangers Chapter 1 was when the lead stranger said it's strange in time and then stranged all over everyone. But it's weird because originally I thought these were being produced as like a prequel to The Strangers. That's how I originally heard it was presented, was that they made a trilogy of prequel films to The Strangers, which sounded like the weirdest thing in the world to me. Like, why would this be anything that we're spending time on, let alone directing with Rennie Harlan? And so I eventually I saw it in theaters. It was, I guess no, the movie does specify that it takes place, I guess, in 2017. I don't know if that's going to matter. I don't know if it's meant to connect up with any of the other movies, but ultimately The Strangers Chapter 1, as it is basically just a kind of very paint by numbers remake of the first Strangers film. Just different people, similar setup, similar vibe. Kind of kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it kind of doesn't. It does take the ending of The Strangers 2 and kind of slides that in. So it feels like The Strangers Chapter 2 is kind of like gonna do something different, because The Strangers is a weird franchise. I don't mean to get too distracted here, but the first one comes out 2004, I think. Like it's pretty old. He says. But so
I mean, yeah, 2004 is
2008.
21 years ago, Andrew.
2008. It was 2008. I'm sorry. It's
Okay,
only
not too bad.
17 years ago.
Can't drink yet.
Can't drink. I could. Or no, I couldn't. I could drink 2 months later. But it's the first one's interesting. I think it's a very interesting movie. It got a little bit of flack at the time just because it was kind of brutal. Definitely like a little. There's no catharsis. There's no anything. It's very strange. Hence the name, I guess. 10 years later, they release a sequel. Like, full-on decade later. That transfers it from a single home to a trailer park. Makes for a very weird experience, because part of the appeal of the original is that claustrophobic feeling of being trapped. Almost an isolation horror of sorts. By moving it to like a trailer park, you kind of remove that. It becomes this big open space, and now suddenly we're kind of just in standard slasher territory. The thing that kind of made the first one unique is now kind of lost. There's randomly like really striking scenes in it though. Like the whole movie is at night and it's dark, but then there's this random scene at a pool where all these neon lights are on and Total Eclipse of the Heart is playing in the background, and it changes the vibe of the movie like completely for like 4 minutes, where suddenly you feel like you're like in an Outrun synthwave video, and then it goes back. But that movie kind of ends with this tease that, you know, they think they've gotten rid of the strangers, but they haven't actually. And neither of those led to anything. Liv Tyler starred in the first one. There were talks that she was going to come back for another one. She never did. The second one ultimately kind of never led to anything. So the first of this new one kind of takes all of it, mashes it together. And so now I guess The Strangers Chapter 2 is going to sort of be like the idea of like, what if somebody survives and takes the fight to the strangers? That's what I can guess is happening, but just, it's really weird. So, it's really weird. The Strangers Chapter 1 was not particularly well received critically, but made $48 million off of like an $8.5 million budget, so certainly plenty successful. So I assume we'll see the new one, or the next one, probably towards the fall of this year. Probably be a Halloween-esque release, I would assume. But, yeah. When I saw he was directing a trilogy of Strangers films, I was like, how weird.
A lot of interesting choices. Yeah, up and down.
Choices are being
Those
made.
three
That's
movies,
the nice
yeah.
way of saying it.
For sure. Andrew, let's do it, man. Let's jump into this movie, talk about all the positives, everything we like about Deep Blue Sea. Are you ready?
Yes.
A group of top scientists and researchers at an underwater facility are hoping to discover a cure for Alzheimer's with a protein found in shark brains. In order to derive more protein, the scientists genetically alter 3 mako sharks to be larger, and as a side effect, they become much smarter. While an executive from a company helping fund the project is visiting the facility, the super sharks begin attacking the lab in an attempt to sink it and reach open waters. The survivors of... Open Water. It's another good shark attack movie, Andrew. The survivors of the initial attack, including the head researcher, a shark wrangler, and the onboard chef, must work together to survive the night and possibly destroy the sharks. You know, Andrew, the whole underwater facility thing, that's the secret sauce of this movie. Because unlike most shark attack movies, I'm not really thinking of Jaws through most of it, other than like very obvious homages they have here. But the fact that like we're in a laboratory for 90% of the runtime gives it its own identity. I think that was a super smart move.
I agree. I think it gives it a little bit more of that. Talk about the isolation horror, the kind of we're stuck here with this thing. You know, something like The Thing, like versus Jaws, which is like the whole beach, the whole thing. Like there's an openness to Jaws, like a vastness. Whereas Deep Blue Sea, you add in that kind of claustrophobia, that idea that we're stuck here with these things, we can't get out, it's dangerous, there's nowhere to go. I think that is it's a good way to take the concept and make it different. And I think that's actually like, you know, isolation horror is actually probably one of like my favorite approaches to horror stuff. Just the idea that you're trapped with this thing, basically. I think that's a really cool way to do it, and it makes it like I just saw The Wolfman, which not what I was hoping, but still like takes that kind of isolation approach to it. You take something like you think about another kind of not really a shark movie, but there's another underwater movie called Underwater. That is another sea-based movie where if something goes wrong, we're kind of stuck under here with this thing. And so I genuinely love that approach. I think it's a great way to make it stand alone and be its own thing.
Alien or The Thing, Andrew? What's the better isolation horror?
I choose death.
Which would you say? I might try to make it easier. Which would you rather watch on any given day?
Probably The Thing.
Yeah, a little. Yeah, I would agree with that. A little more
like I love Alien,
personality driven.
Like, I love Alien. It's great. I have an Alien poster signed by Sigourney Weaver and Tom Skerritt and Veronica Cartwright at this point. Very cool. Also, sadly, the only people from that movie still alive. Now I'm sad again. But I think it's Alien's great. I think Aliens might be the one I rewatch a little bit more, just because Ripley in a giant forklift loader thing fighting a queen alien is about as cool as it gets.
Bill Paxton.
Yeah, I love The Thing. Keith David, Kurt Russell at like the peak of his powers. Like it's pretty good. The Thing is about like talk about perfect movies. The Thing and Alien both like really creep towards it, I think. But The Thing is just so good. It's unbelievable. I had a friend that just saw it for the first time and had like no real knowledge of it, and I was like, dude, I would love to be in that spot again, to like have no knowledge.
Men in Black neuralizer yourself and then rewatch it.
I need you to specifically block just my memories of The Thing from my brain so that I can experience it for the first time again.
And then you watch it like, wow, this is like that game Among Us.
Oh man. Oh god.
Andrew, we keep getting distracted. Got to stay on point here. We're going to talk about this movie and our favorite scenes, but before we get to that, you know what we're going to do. We're going to talk about this cast Starting with the high point, best casting, best performance of the film, because every episode we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond the Call of Duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, who's getting your Mark Strong Award for Deep Blue Sea?
I thought about this one for a while, because there's a couple of people I think are worthy of it, but I had to go with my gut.
I think it's tough.
I had to go with my gut, and my gut is I'm giving it to Samuel L. Jackson as Russell Franklin, just because I love his death so much. His death is one of the most
Andrew.
unironically funny things I've ever seen. It's just so neat. Like, I laugh every time. I know I'm not supposed to, but I do. But the delivery he gives in this of like this painfully serious monologue about his experience being stuck in like an avalanche, just to be punctuated by him getting bitten by a shark. But his performance in that scene,
bitten by a shark, is the most understatement way you could phrase that.
Anyway, I love his performance. I forgot how sort of early into the movie that happens.
Yeah.
Like, it happens like halfway through. Like, there's
it's almost like a Psycho thing where like he's the biggest name in the movie in 1999 and he dies halfway into the runtime. Not even, probably.
Yeah. The Janet Leigh of his time, as he's often been described.
Janet Leigh Jackson.
Oh man, might want to cut that one. We'll see. But anyway, I know it might be a weird pick for some, but I love Samuel L. Jackson. He's great. He's got the right wit. He's being Samuel L. Jackson in this movie. There's not much else to it, but it works. He's kind of the fish, not really a fish out of water, but this underwater stuff is not really his thing, as evidenced by the fact he is eventually eaten by a shark. But I like it. I think it's very entertaining to me. I think he understands the assignment. I think that's a big thing. I think a lot of people here understand the assignment, to be fair. But it works for me. So Samuel L. Jackson as Russell Franklin.
Man, yeah, it's a great performance, and you immediately go to that scene. But he's great throughout. I mean, he does. Given his limited runtime, he does a lot to really establish this character and layer in so much stuff. He's very skeptical of the research, but he's not cynical about it. He's happy to see that it's being successful, but he has this mysterious thing with the avalanche. They all know he survived this traumatic experience, and shortly before his death, he reveals that it was traumatic for reasons beyond what people know about. I mean, there's a lot going on here, but you couldn't just cast anybody in this role. It has to be someone well-known, right? It has to be a well-established actor, someone you don't expect to die, and someone, Andrew, that can bring a little something extra to the role. It can bring a little bit of that. Help me out here. There it is. Big animal gravitas. And he certainly does it. I mean, that is like a classic Samuel L. Jackson rousing speech that he's giving right before his death. It kind of subverts the whole thing. Even though in 1999, I don't know, he was a big name, but I don't know. Samuel L. Jackson has a very, very, very interesting career where I think, Andrew, tell me if you disagree with this, his star power, his career, like, he's only grown in power. His career trajectory only goes up. Many actors, especially ones with decades-long careers, many movie stars have peaks and valleys, ups and downs, and yeah, he's had some flops throughout, but like, how respected he is, how big of a deal he is, it only rises and rises and rises. It only goes in one direction, no?
I don't know that he's at like a peak of his star power right now, but I don't know that him in a movie is like a guarantee success necessarily. But
I don't know if he was ever that kind of actor anyway, though. I don't know if
that's true. But like, obviously the Nick Fury thing, I think, ended up being like a huge thing for him, being associated with the MCU and being one of those people who kind of showed up in so many movies. That's the thing I think kind of really, it cemented him in pop culture, was definitely that. But you look back to all the Tarantino movies he's been in, even before that, just looking at this man's career, like even stuff in the late 90s like Shaft or Out of Sight or said The Long Kiss Goodnight, like it is, I think up until like probably Marvel, it is just like a steady ascent. And I think he's kind of maybe leveled out, I guess, maybe, but like it's a pretty steady rise, and it's not really like there's no real fall back at any point. So yeah, I would probably agree with that overall.
Look, I mean, his co-star in Pulp Fiction, John Travolta, look at his career path since 1994.
When's the peak of John
That-
Travolta? It's probably that. That's an awful thing to say. But
It's probably
It
the
might be that,
his run in the 90s. I don't know what singular movie it is, but Pulp Fiction brings it back, and then he's got like
I guess
Broken
Face
Arrow, and Michael, and Face Off.
Face Off
That
is
whole run.
97. Broken Arrow and Michael or Phenomenon are all the year before, and then Battlefield Earth is 2000.
Phenomenon.
If there's a moment that probably takes him out,
Yeah.
it's probably Battlefield Earth.
Yeah.
Woof.
Future episode
So
of
the
this
Punisher
podcast, no
with
doubt.
Thomas Jane, bringing it all back around. Yeah, there's a deep decline that comes at a certain point. It is unfortunate, but not Samuel L. Jackson, man.
I have a feeling we're gonna talk more about his death scene a little bit later, but my Mark Strong award is gonna go somewhere else. And honestly, it was like a 4-way battle for me. I like a lot of these performances. I think it's one of the strengths of this movie is the variety of characters and good performances and the tone they're all bringing. And this might sound weird out of left field, Andrew, but my Mark Strong award is going to Michael Rappaport as Tom Scoggins. I don't even remember them saying that last name in the movie, but
Scoggins.
I love Michael Rappaport in like anything he shows up in, but I love him in this movie. He the whole idea of the Mark Strong Award is they're elevating the entire film, and I think he does, but I think what's most impressive is how much he elevates this little supporting role that he's given. On paper, I just don't think there's too much to this character. But his relationship, especially with Thomas Jane's character, he brings so much likability to it, so much personality to it, so much, he almost makes a catchphrase out of who you gonna trust? That's right, you trust me, because I'm trustworthy. Like, I don't think that was written to have that rhythm or be a catchphrase or be a callback, but that line delivery has stuck with me for 20 plus years now. And it helps that I just like Michael Rappaport and everything I see him in. I mean, talk about, I don't even know what you call him. Journeyman actor, great character actor, but also he's a comedian and he's got a very successful podcast and great YouTube videos. If you've never seen the YouTube video with him and the weird looking cat, look that one up. It's hilarious. That's not even getting into like his TV stuff. I mean, he's done everything. He shows up in a movie that we always got to shout out every time it vaguely comes up on our podcast. Copland.
Copland.
Got a
Yes,
pretty
thank you.
pivotal role
I was
there.
waiting to talk about it. I was waiting for Copland.
I like Mike Rappaport. Great character actor, but this isn't just a career award here. I love what he's doing in this movie specifically. Yeah. His character is very funny. He rides that comic relief line without being like a grating character. It's a tough line to walk. He walks it perfectly. For all those reasons, he's getting my Mark Strong award.
No issues whatsoever with this pick. I don't think it's a strange choice. I don't think it's an odd choice. I think this is genuinely a great pick for a solid performance. He puts together like you said, he has that friendship with Thomas Jane kind of built there. He's got a likability. He's a comic relief, but he's like smart. He's not like kind of like a bumbling comic relief. He has a usage here. And when he meets his untimely end, you are sad about it. So that means he's being very, very effective at what he's doing. And yeah, like I said, can't say enough things about his career, but yeah, Copland. Always gotta shout out Copland. If you haven't seen Copland, folks, 10 out of 10.
Great movie.
Excuse me, 10 out of 10. No.
Is that your personal favorite Sylvester Stallone movie?
Probably. Yeah. Like, I mean, I thought we were all like Rocky's good. Rocky's a great classic underdog sports movie.
Rocky,
like,
Demolition Man.
Demolition Man's great. but Copland, I actually, I know Rocky is, again, for a lot of people, considered his greatest performance, but for me, even more, like, I think Copland might be Stallone's best genuine acting performance. Like,
Okay.
I've mentioned it before, but, like, they make him
Schlubby.
pathetic in that movie.
Yeah.
Like, he's not just schlubby. He's just, like, the way he talks, the way he acts, the way he is, like, that is 100% a pathetic man. And like, the whole time you're watching it, you're like, how are you making Sylvester Stallone look like this? And it works, and he nails it. And I mean, that's a stacked movie. We've talked about it before, but like, you got Rappaport and Stallone, but you've also got
Harvey Keitel,
Ray Liotta,
yeah.
Robert De Niro, like Robert Patrick's in it, Janine Garofalo. Like, it's this like insanely stacked movie with a who's who, and it's a tough thing to stand up against some of those guys. And Stallone, not necessarily known for his acting chops, he's up to the task.
An early James Mangold, or
Yep.
not so much as early. It's just like I feel like at some point around Logan, James Mangold becomes this almost like prestige director.
A little
But-
bit more auteur, yeah.
He's been killing it for a while. Underappreciated first half of that career there.
Yeah, you got Walk the Line, you've got 310 to Yuma, you've got Copland, you've got even the Wolverine, which I think is a little underrated by some folks.
I agree.
Not the greatest, but I like
agree.
it. But yeah, and then obviously you get Logan, and then Ford versus Ferrari, and then he just did the Bob Dylan movie, and then did some little indie called Indiana Jones 5. But it's
It's literally an indie movie, Andrew. So I don't.
that was you got there.
Was that the joke? Was that the joke? Is that the joke you're making, Andrew?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Andrew, Thomas Jane is in this movie.
I'm
We've
smarter
discussed
than the
it.
average bear, Chris.
He plays a character named Carter Blake, the Shark Wrangler. That's a real thing. Boy, I love Thomas Jane. I already talked about it already, and I thought going into this he would be my Mark Strong Award winner. I'm certain he has picked one up already. Of course, we've talked about The Punisher. I think he got one. No way to check. No way to know for sure, but I feel pretty good about that. I like Thomas Jane in everything that I see him in. I can now only see the Christopher Lambert resemblance ever since
You're
we covered
welcome.
Highlander or Highlander 2, but it's really uncanny. But Thomas Jane, he's great, and the tone of this movie, I feel like the movie overall knows what it is, but it takes everything pretty serious. I don't know how to explain. Like, the movie knows, look, we're here for a good time, but the characters are selling the horror or the action or whatever it is, which I like. It doesn't slip into like parody or even camp. It's not really a campy movie. Everyone's got to take this pretty seriously, including Thomas Jane. I mean, like I said, he's a shark wrangler. Like that's not a thing. Like oh, we got to do research on these sharks, so hire a shark wrangler so we can wrangle the sharks. It's such a weird thing, but he takes that so seriously. He's got this backstory where he's a criminal and he's trying to keep his head down and just get good work. Plays it all deadly serious. Dude is in like ridiculous shape. I mean, you got to be to wrangle the sharks, but
Oh yeah.
I like Thomas Jane. I like the tone that he strikes here. I think he makes like one joke, and it's at the very end of this movie. But otherwise, he plays it all deadly serious, which I think is again vital to the success of this film and the enjoyment.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think he definitely knows the type of role he wants to play this. I mean, he is essentially our lead here, the man who kind of is lived around these sharks and knows what he kind of needs to expect. He's used to wrangling them. So as things start to get out of hand, he's kind of the expert that they look to, and he gets plenty of cool big hero moments throughout this movie to kind of stand up and be Sharkman. But basically Aquaman. This is basically an Aquaman movie. But
Yeah,
it's shame they didn't call it that.
when Aquaman has to murder those sharks, classic Aquaman.
I'm sure Aquaman has had to murder fish before when they tried to kill him. But anyway, we've talked about Thomas J before. You could keep all the phrase on. I'm glad that you see the resemblance to Christopher Lambert, and you notice that it's actually a resemblance versus the resemblances you come up with, which aren't even close. So
It's very common in Hollywood, apparently, for two actors to look very similar.
if we
This
had a
is
nickel
one
for every
in a
time
long
on this show we've talked about it, we'd have like 4 nickels. So
Saffron Burrows plays Dr. Susan McAllister, the lead researcher and scientist on this project. Finding a cure for Alzheimer's is very personal for her, as she discusses several times throughout. Again, going back to that serious tone, she gives this speech about how hard it was to see her father suffer with Alzheimer's, and it's why she's so adamant about finding this cure, so much so that she goes off books and genetically alters these sharks, where she's explicitly not supposed to, and she lies about it. And because of her obsession for finding this cure, it's what ultimately sets off the events of this movie. And she makes the big sacrifice at the end. Andrew, what I remember from this performance most, it had to be in the trailer, because I've seen this movie a few times, but the line, me and mutual friend Doug will do this all the time out of nowhere. I texted him the other day. I said, I won't even do the accent. As a side effect, the sharks got smarter, but we tend to say it with the most extreme version of that accent. But you watch it in the movie, and it's pretty straightforward. But for whatever reason, I've heard the line so many times, in my brain, it is super out there. It's like the meme of Will Smith saying "Welcome to Earth" in Independence Day, but you watch the movie and he just says "Welcome to Earth." I don't know, but for whatever reason, some of these lines, when they become like huge cultural touchstones, get a little warped. And her giving that delivery, that is always stuck in my head, as well as cutting her palm and saying "Come to Mama" at the very end.
that one's in my brain for a different reason. It's weird how it lines under your head, dude. I still have moments where I'll be sitting alone in my house, like Liz is at work, nobody else is here, and just out of nowhere I go, "The morgue? She'll be furious." Like, I'll be driving my car on the way home, and I'll just be like, "The morgue."
It's a very recent addition to your repertoire.
It is. It's been in there since last month or 2 months ago, and it's not left. No, that's as a side effect. The sharks got smarter. Is like, it's so much exposition and heavy lifting is being done by that one statement that like the movie is carried essentially off of that one line, and it's a little funny in hindsight.
It is. I love. Man, I remember this was also in the trailer. Unlocking a core memory here. There's this moment where, like, the camera is looking down at an underwater tunnel, and there's 2 sharks on either side. It's when they have Thomas Jane trapped, and he pulls out a gun, and they swim backwards to get away. And they have that in the trailer, where someone goes, "The sharks swim backwards. Sharks can't swim backwards." And I remember telling people I saw this movie, and I would repeat that like if it was some well-known fact. I'm like, "Oh yeah, Deep Blue Sea is that movie where like the sharks get smart so they can like they swim backwards. Sharks can't swim backwards." Andrew, I have no idea if that's true. I assume it's true because of this movie, but I just sort of took it in stride.
No
like,
idea if it actually is.
If a shark, and also I love the idea that, let's assume it is true that sharks can't swim backwards. This movie is saying it's only because they're too dumb to figure out how. And if only they had a bigger brain, they could figure out the motion to swim backwards. And it's certainly not some sort of physical limitation. It's just because they're not smart enough.
Apparently it's true. Sharks do not swim backwards.
Because they're too dumb, Andrew. That's why.
Apparently they're just
They've never thought of it before.
They're like Zoolander. You can't turn left. They've just never thought about going backwards. They want to go. Andrew, they can't swim backwards. They have to just like turn all the way around.
Andrew, someone else that was vying for my Mark Strong Award and my heart, LL Cool J as Preacher. I mean, it's got his whole name written out here, but they call him Preach. They call him Preacher. He's the chef here, and a very religious man, often praying and reciting verses as he in bargaining with God as he tries to make his way out of here. A lot of screen time on his own. He's separate from the group for about half the movie before they finally join up. He's talking to himself or to his bird, and holding his own. He's another comic relief that I think is successful. He gives, man, that prayer that he gives at the end of this movie where he like adds some profanity to some Bible verses, unironically kind of gets you jacked up. Like it's like
genuinely
it's
gets you kind of like,
pretty cool. Yeah, let's go. Let's find some sharks.
Go
Exactly.
down to the aquarium to handle this right now.
Man, I like LL Cool J. I everything I've seen him in. The audacity to call himself LL Cool J, like it doesn't roll off the tongue. But it's like, yeah, it's LL. You know, that's who he is. I see his real name. I have it here, but I'm never gonna call him that. It's LL Cool J, man.
His original name is so boring. But no, I agree. Like I almost anything I see him in, I think he maybe you could say he's kind of playing the same type of character, but he knows how to utilize it, knows how to do it well, and knows how to kind of work within the confines of whatever he is. And here he's doing exactly what he needs to do, and it comes off really well.
I think he did one of the CSIs for a long time.
He did. CSI LA, I think it was.
I'm not a huge fan of those shows, but I kind of want to watch a few episodes that he's in. Just like, is he doing this or is he doing like serious cop drama?
It's a little more towards the serious cop drama, but hey, if you like other alum of the show, Chris O'Donnell, they star in it together.
Okay, there you go. A alum of the show, Cool J from Halloween, H2O, as well. So that's the first time that we've talked about Mr. Ladies Love himself. First name Ladies Love. Jacqueline McKenzie plays Jan Higgins. She kind of sells the horror, I think, the most because her love interest, I'm not sure if they're dating, married, or what, but the person she's clearly involved with is among the first to die, and she's quick to blame Dr. McAllister and be very emotionally distraught for the rest of her time on the film. So this isn't really a movie heavy on tears and screaming and selling it that way like a slasher, but her character does a lot of it. If there's any character that's selling it, it is hers, and she is quite good at it. I was looking through her credits. A few things that I'm familiar with or have seen. This isn't one of them, but Divine Secrets of the Ya-Ya Sisterhood. Andrew, I've never seen it. I don't even know what it's about, but that is a movie title that will never, ever leave my brain. I also saw that she plays the doctor in Malignant, which is a more recent film that is quite a ride, quite a blast. So still out there,
dude.
Still doing
that
her thing.
movie rules.
It's so fun.
I have a friend that loathes it, and I just do not understand.
I think we have a mutual friend that loathes it, Andrew.
I have two friends that loathe it.
Oh my gosh! And they're still your friends.
We like other things, but like it's genuinely nuts to me. I was like, I finished that movie, and I was like, man, that was wild. And then like I went to my room, I was like, yeah, that was pretty. He was like, dude, I hate it. And I was like, well, why? Like, I was like,
how can you watch the
police station?
Andrew, I swear yes, thank you. Oh my god, you knew what I was gonna ask. I was literally gonna ask you, what's the building called that police officers work at? God damn it.
What's the big building with the cops in it? That's the courthouse.
How do you watch
yes.
that police station fight and not throw your hands up and say, this is a blast?
Exactly.
This is
awesome.
this is great.
You talk about creators having vision. You talk about, somebody kind of just taking an idea that they have and realizing it in the most effective way possible. And you've got Brian Ferry on the soundtrack. Like, how can you go wrong with this, man? This is 10 out of 10, no notes. Well, maybe not 10 out of 10, but like an easy, 7.5 out of 10, no notes. What a blast. Yeah, I don't get it. I genuinely don't understand.
I've
got to rewatch it now, man.
It's going on my list again. Ada Turturro plays Brenda Kearns. Not a ton of screen time, but I mentioned earlier that this movie does a good job in casting and giving every character sort of a little, personality and relationships with one another in a gimmick. And she is big on like dancing. She does like the announcements in the PA. She's up in the watchtower of the facility, putting on music, helping with the party, having a good time. But again, among some of the first to die, so not in there a whole lot. And you might be looking at this actress's name, Ida Turturro, and saying, that sounds familiar. John Turturro's cousin, apparently. So there you go. Had no idea.
Nice. Yeah. Small part. Not a whole lot going on here, but in the few scenes that she's in, she is very good. Adds a kind of innocence doesn't seem like the right word, but like she's the one that's kind of like just trying to keep the mood light, trying to do her thing, and it is all going terribly wrong, and she doesn't take it well. Because why would you?
Stellan Skarsgård plays Jim Whitlock. Boy, what do you say about Stellan Skarsgård? Is he a journeyman actor? Is he a character actor? Is he a prestige actor?
Yes.
All of the above? Yeah, I mean, international star for sure. I mean, not just, he's got plenty of Hollywood credits, but also international films as well, and has just been in everything and done every kind of role. I think I've seen him be comedic. I've seen him be a real jerk. I've seen him in the MCU. I've seen him whip out his self on screen. I mean, the dude's kind of done everything there is to do in film and is still doing it.
He's in one of my kind of favorite underrated De Niro movies, Ronin. Don't know if you've seen that one.
Have not.
I think it's pretty good. One of John Frankenheimer's last films, might be his last film. But the man, for those who don't know, John Frankenheimer is the director of the original Manchurian Candidate, amongst a variety of other films. But also directed Reindeer Game. But so we've talked about him on the show before. But
nice.
Stellan Skarsgård is like, yeah, he's did everything. I mean, you've seen like he's deeply psychotic and stuff like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. He's funny, he's witty, he's all the above. He can pretty much do anything. Oddly, would reteam with Rennie Harlan after this for Exorcist: The Beginning, where he would take on the role of Father Lancaster Marin. And in both versions of that, because believe it or not, folks, that movie exists in two different versions. One directed by Paul Schrader, the other directed by Rennie Harlan. You guys may not realize this. Paul Schrader wrote Taxi Driver and wrote Raging Bull, and then directed an Exorcist prequel. And
he did the music on the Jay Leno show, right?
Yes, that was Paul Schrader.
Yeah.
No, it is a that movie is a thing that exists. That's about as nice as I can say it. But yeah, Stellan Skarsgård, like I'm sure we've talked about him before. Have we talked about him proper? Like, I'm certain we have.
I don't know. Did we do one of the Thors? Did we do Love and Thunder on the best of the best?
We talked about Love and Thunder. I think we talked about Love and Thunder, so we probably talked about him there. Something like that. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Or did we do Dark World? I don't remember. But here, he's kind of our expert. Still a little bit of comedy to him. There's an old joke when Samuel L. Jackson sees him for the first time, and she's like, he's a brilliant man. And he's like, well, he's pissing into the wind, so how brilliant is he? But then he meets a very, very unfortunate end. It's quite sad. But
he meets like 3 unfortunate ends.
Yeah, he gets an arm bit off, then he gets captured by the shark.
He's dropped in the water in the gurney.
Like,
yeah, it's great.
It's a bad run. It's a tough way to go out. So but yeah, it's he's the experts, and ends up paying for the actions of this team.
Andrew, let's talk about the scenes of this film, and let's start by talking about the best scene of the movie, or at least our personal favorite. So, in your opinion, When is this movie firing on all cylinders? And what is the best scene of Deep Blue Sea?
It's when Samuel L. Jackson dies. It's. I've already said it.
I mean,
it
it's
is.
yeah, it's okay.
It's up.
I think I'm gonna highlight a different one, but maybe I'm just being
That's
contrarian because this is certainly the most iconic scene. It's the one everyone knows. It's the one that, if you haven't seen the movie itself, you've probably seen this scene as a clip on YouTube, right?
Or you've heard Dave Chappelle as Samuel L. Jackson yelling about it on the Chappelle Show. But there's a.
I don't
there's
think
a
I'm
clip.
from. I'm gonna have to look that up now. I'm not
He
sure if
does
I know that.
this. He does this joke where he makes a beer called Samuel Jackson instead
Okay,
of Samuel
yeah,
Adams.
I remember that.
And
yeah.
so the joke is that it's Chappelle as Samuel L. Jackson. He just screams everything, but he just starts talking about all the movies he was in, and he just goes, "Deep Blue Sea, a shark ate me," and then like just disappears again. Like he just screams it out. But anyway, I mentioned it before. This is the scene where he kind of reveals that the circumstances of his surviving the avalanche were not as maybe clean cut as suggested.
Can we break this down here? Because I'm not sure exactly what he's saying here.
Is he just saying they killed them, or is he saying they ate them? I don't know.
Okay, he says,
That's where I'm at.
7 of us survived the slide, but only 5 made it out. And he says, we made an oath up until now, that I kept up until now. I'm breaking it. He says they started turning on each other, which makes me feel like he killed them.
Yeah.
Right? He's like, we need to stop fighting. I've seen it go bad. We start turning on each other. Our story was that the slide killed them, but we know the truth. I got the impression that they killed them, that he murdered somebody. I mean, that's what it sounds like he's saying. Like, the survivors, murdered 2 people.
Yeah, and like it may be like a fight of passion or something. Murder sounds like, like premeditated or something, but it's not quite the vibe I get. But I definitely get the understanding that they killed those people because they turned on each other, whether, the circumstances of which are unknown. But that's the vibe I have, simply because he kind of is having a conversation with Thomas Jane earlier, where they kind of do reveal that Thomas Jane went to prison for a while, I guess 2 years or so. And he was like, oh, so you're the rich guy with no shady background? So they kind of imply that there is something hidden back there. Given that he's not a Wendigo, I guess they didn't eat each other, because that's how you turn into a Wendigo. But it's one of the ways you turn into a Wendigo. Which that would have made for a wild movie. Shark versus Wendigo. I'm just saying, I'm available to write things. But it is. But yeah, so I that's the vibe I get, is just that they killed them. They got into a disagreement, whether that was putting the group at risk or whatever, or however it happened. But yeah,
It's just such a weird thing where he's giving like a unifying speech, get everybody fired up, and like he just casually admits that he's a murderer. It's just so
you guys need to get it all together, or I'm gonna kill you. I
will kill
gonna
you.
Unify you better than that.
But now, talking about line deliveries burned into my brain. So we're not going to fight anymore. Like the cadence that he does of that, and it's like basically the last thing he says. He says, "We're gonna seal up this hole." Boom! Shark jumps out. Perfect timing. That shark, fantastic comedy timing. I mean, 10 out of 10.
It's one of the most, like I said, funniest things I've ever seen, because genuinely, it's this whole rousing. I've seen how this goes bad. I've seen how people get killed. I've seen this. It's this whole big, like, if we don't figure this out, we are all going to die. So we're going to move forward, and how? It's
good.
What
I did not.
Props to the shark. I mean, having that good a time.
So good.
Is,
like, he's just down there, crouched, like, waiting, like, listening. Like, I know he's going to set me up. Like, come on,
We're going to get here. We got to find the right moment. I heard that was improv. So, what a great performance.
One thing that didn't strike me until years later, going back. #PP. CG is so bad. It's so, like, once it grabs him, it is the most CG looking.
It's awful.
Samuel Jackson I've ever seen. But you know what? I don't overall watch this movie and think, man, this has aged so bad. It's hard to go back to. There's certainly some moments of dated CG. Yes. But I think, by and large, it's used in good spots. There's certainly some animatronic physical sharks at times. You can tell at times. So they're doing that when they can. And I just, I don't know. I think it's just used smart. This is definitely a dodgy area for CG where the ambition kind of overreaches the capabilities at times. But I think this one kind of, by and large, makes it out. There's tons of practical stunts here. There's so many really good like water stunts, with water rushing into a room and knocking people over and stuff and knocking them downstairs. There's a lot of physical action that, I guess I'm trying to say the shots that are CG, I don't know how else you do it. You don't have an animated shark or an animatronic shark physically jump out of the water, grab Samuel L. Jackson. That's not happening. So, like, the other option was you don't have this great scene happen. So yeah, that's when you
have to do it like
CG.
off screen or something, and you have to like imply it and like that. None of that's gonna hit.
You don't get that shock factor.
Like Necessary Evil is not the right version, but like it's just like this is the best of the worst options, I guess, is the way you could look at it, or the best of the weakest options.
We almost called the podcast "Best of the Worst Options."
Best of the worst options. That was actually it's in my notes. It's in the dossier of when we founded the podcast. But it's still just a wild scene though. The way it comes off is just like you said, it's the most iconic moment of the film. But it definitely hits for me.
I can't deny it's the most iconic. Like I said, maybe I'm being contrarian here, but a scene I really like, and I'm always excited to get to it, is the big finale here. I think just after being underwater for essentially the entire movie, the finale where it's like daybreak and they make it to the surface, I love that set. I love just like the concrete walkways that are just above the surface with the metal gate. Like, this movie does such a good job establishing its geography and how everything works. And where we get to this sort of just debris and water at the end, we understand everything that's happening. We understand how we get to this point, why it looks the way it does. We understand the stakes. I mean, the movie really earns it. I love this final set. I love this final set piece. I love the subversion where Preach gets attacked by the shark. The three of them swim to the surface. You can bet one of them's gonna get killed. Oh no, Preach, she's dead. But the camera stays with the shark. It stays with Preacher in his jaws, and he starts fighting back. And he jabs the shark in the eye with his necklace and gets free. This might sound hyperbolic, but I don't know if I've seen that in a shark attack movie before this, or many others ever, really. Like, once a shark gets you, you're gone. That's just kind of the rules of a shark attack movie. For him to fight out of it is pretty cool, and I love that it's Preacher of all characters, because, like I said, I like this character. I like this character a lot, and that is something I filed away in the back of my brain. And I'm only half joking about this, but like, if I were to get attacked by a shark, if I jab it in the eye, I bet I can get out of it. The eye is vulnerable, right? I should start wearing a crucifix or something.
Was the thing you were supposed to do.
Is that real? Are you? I don't know.
Apparently they can't actually swim backwards, but let's see. Punch
it in the nose and they'll release you? I think they're going to release you. Like, sharks don't typically drag you to the depths and eat you. Like, they taste you and then move on.
It's basically a terrible idea because underwater you can't punch for anything. So
that's true, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah. This is a Reddit post. How effective is punching a shark in the nose really? Has anyone ever tried this? First off, yes. Have any of you ever tried fighting a shark and punching it in the nose?
But you ever boop the snoop?
But somebody responded, I use my words with them like an adult. Yeah, it's most people are like, yeah, it's not going to work out well for you.
Yeah. Well, worked out for Preacher. I like the finale of this movie. I mentioned Coming to Mama. I like the whole harpoon hooked up to dynamite. Got to have a big contraption. The biggest parallels with Jaws, by the way, are the shark kills, which I think are deliberate homages to different Jaws kills. Because, like, you have the dynamite, you have the electrocuting the water. I think it's your Jaws 1 and 2 right there. It's blow him up at the end. Hey, bring me back some sushi. Great stuff. I mentioned Thomas Jane gets one joke finally at the very end, and it's Thomas Jane is riding on the shark. Preacher has to shoot the shark with a harpoon, hits it through the dorsal fin, which also goes through Thomas Jane's leg, and he says, 45-foot shark, and he hit me. Nice.
Nice.
I think his character arc is he can be a little lighthearted at the very end.
Hey, some people never learn that.
It's true. Andrew, how'd you like the finale of this movie?
I think it's perfect for this movie, the story it's telling, the way it's going. I think this is the big bombastic finale that you want. Like you said, we've kind of done the almost isolation horror aspect of it already. A lot of the scenes with Preacher a little bit remind me of like the Velociraptor scenes in Jurassic Park when they're like in the kitchen and stuff. You get like a vibe there for stuff like that. Just that kind of, we're doing everything we can to like escape, survive. It's really cool. Like you said, you get up to the surface. A little bit of a water world vibe at times, just this kind of thing that sits floating on the water. Apparently these things were built off of the Titanic sets, some of the Titanic water tanks. So some of this stuff was, whereas other sets apparently had like fish tanks as the windows. That's how they made it look like
smart. That's cool. Yeah.
It is. That's thinking with your head there. But it's really cool to get out in the open. You kind of, like I said, you change the vibe a little bit. You get all your big kills, all your tension out of the isolation, the kind of cramped in claustrophobic feel. So to kind of take it outside, do the big open air finale, blow up the shark, all that. It's your kind of typical big action ending, and it's what you want for this. It's what you want for a movie where sharks learn to turn on ovens.
Yeah.
To be
There's
clear,
a lot of scenes.
I want to stress here. They legitimately try to cook LL Cool J in an oven after he hides in one. That literally is a thing that happens in this movie.
He's like, yeah, maybe this tastes
nuts.
better. I've been eating them raw. Maybe if they cook them a little bit.
He's tired of human sushi. He wants the human steak cut.
There's scenes in this movie, a lot of scenes in this movie where with basically a shark indoors. Like literally a shark chases LL Cool J down a hallway. Like, just think about that sentence. He's getting chased down a hallway by a shark. These scenes are like the nightmares people had after Jaws, or the illogical fears that people have. I've seen so many people say like they have a fear of a shark when they're the deep end of a swimming pool. Like they know intellectually it makes no sense, but just that feeling that in the dark waters maybe a shark. This movie is bringing that to life. Another reason I think it's just a smart sort of twist on the genre. It's like sharks indoors, not something you see very often.
No, not at all. I agree with that. I think that is an interesting little, like you said, making a shark movie by nature almost has to be outside, big open spaces. You get some stuff where you get like kind of a shark ends up in a lake, but even still, like it's the lake, it's contained. This is an instance where they find a way to put sharks, like you said, inside. It is clever. It is different. It makes it stand out. The idea that like I'm stuck in a room and I am stuck in a kitchen with a shark and I am in trouble. Like that's just such a strange thing. Like to write it on paper even would just be so weird. Like, so then this shark tries to cook LL Cool J in an oven. And yeah, like somebody wrote that down, put it into a script, and it got shot with like a $60 million budget. Like that's kind of crazy.
We're all better for it, Andrew.
We're all better for it. Yeah, no shade here towards it. I'm like, you followed through, you made it happen. But yeah, it definitely makes it be a different experience, a different thing. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if that genuinely had people being like, what if there is a shark in my toilet?
I love the scene with Preacher where it's another scene where like it seems like it's going to be super serious. He finds a digital camera that's recording himself, and he's kind of doing a trope we've seen in movies before where he's like, if you find this footage, that means I didn't make it. this is my legacy. And he even reveals like he has like a kid. He has like a wife and kid out there. But when he's thinking about what his last words are going to be, he says, "We'll begin with making the perfect omelet, which is made with 2 eggs, not 3. Amateurs often add milk for density. This is a mistake." Love it. Love the subversion there. Love the twist. He just wants to tell you how to cook things properly. How to make the perfect omelet. It's good. The movie
good stuff. It makes it a lot more fun. Adds the personality of the character, makes it stand out, makes it a whole different thing, and that's the stuff you remember when you're like, people really do discount just how much memorable characters make a movie more enjoyable. Like, you know, if you have a movie that's pretty standard fare, but the characters are all super funny or memorable, like, you think of how many great comedies where the plot is actually like the least interesting thing. Like, a plot is a simple thing relatively at the end of the day. But when you fill that movie with memorable characters, like you take something like, you know, Caddyshack is about golfing. Like, who cares about golfing? It's not a thing. But when you fill that movie with
it's not a thing to care about golfing.
I know
what you're saying.
Golf, it's not a real thing. But like you take something that's relatively mundane, like golf, and you now apply it and fill a movie with funny, interesting characters that have cool lines and all this. Like, that creates it makes it memorable. It makes it stand out, and that's what people remember. That's what jumps in. So when you have characters in a movie that stand out, are more interesting, the movie is only better for it. Making your characters fully rounded, even not necessarily fully rounded, but giving them quirks that are a little bit believable, and just giving them things that work out. It's stuff that works. And I've definitely seen movies where, like, they try to give characters personality quirks and traits, and it just doesn't land. I remember watching this really, really dumb movie on Netflix once where there's a character carrying around a towel the whole time. And at the end, he makes a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy joke. But it doesn't work at all because, like you've not been built up. It doesn't work at all. So it's this weird quirk they try to give the character, but it rests on you knowing what this reference is. And it just doesn't work. But here, where you just, you add these things to LL Cool J, even stuff like Samuel L. Jackson with his monologue, every character gets kind of these dimensions, and it makes it more memorable.
Dumb and Dumber is about driving across the country to return a briefcase.
Colorado.
That's all it is. It's a road trip to return a briefcase. And then it turns out the guys are dumb.
Really dumb.
This movie does, as much ground as it's breaking, the shark does roar at one point when it gets shot, which is not a thing, but that is a classic shark attack trope. It doesn't escape that one. But I love that first attack on Skarsgård. It's whenever they have the shark sedated on the inside, and it wakes up and just launches his head over and bites off Skarsgård's arm where he has a cigarette in it. It's so gnarly. It's such a cool attack. And the slow motion they use afterwards is great. And like I said, some great water stunts when the water's rushing in. But jump forward a little bit. They're trying to get him life flighted away, but it's storming. They drop... God, just the fear of this, like being strapped to a gurney and they drop you into the water. Like the idea of being strapped to a board underwater is about the most terrifying thing. I guess the only thing more terrifying is if there's sharks in that water, much less like superpowered super sharks. They use his body to break the glass. That is such a cool shot. Like, how he's still alive at that point, I don't know. I don't care. But that shot of them ramming him into the glass to crack it, to break it, such a fun way to kick off the action of this movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It tells you the tone has changed.
But of course, the movie does have to start with an open water shark attack on a boat. You got to get one of those in there. You got to start your movie off that way. I mean, this scene feels so like, I wouldn't be surprised if this was a rewrite or shot by a second unit. It just looks and feels so different. You know, it's young, horny teens out on a boat playing music, and then a shark attacks them. It feels like a producer was like, guys, there's no teenagers. Those are shark attacks on a boat. But it doesn't end the way you expect. It doesn't end with the shark killing the teens, because who shows up? Thomas
The
Jane,
Punisher.
the Shark Punisher. It's exactly what my note
The
says.
Shark Punisher. Wonderful.
But yeah, you gotta start your Shark Attack movie that way.
I'm into it.
I hadn't revisited this movie in a number of years, like I said, but now that I have, it's still fun. It's still a blast. I mean, it sounds hyperbolic again, but it is probably, easily a top 5 Shark Attack movie, right? At least on my rankings. I mean, like, Jaws, of course, is up there. You know, I mentioned Open Water earlier. Haven't thought about that movie in quite some time. Is that a Shark Attack movie? I guess it's a whole debate on its own, but it's a shark-related movie that I remember enjoying quite a
which one?
bit. Open Water. Have you seen Open Water?
I would say that's a Shark Attack movie.
I don't. Well, spoilers. Skip forward if you. Skip forward to 30 seconds if you don't want spoilers. I don't think it's a shark attack. I don't think a shark ever attacks in that movie.
So the sharks are in it, but they never actually attack them. The tension is if the sharks are going to attack them.
Correct. And I'm pretty sure the finale is, again, spoilers. I think they drown themselves so the sharks don't eat them. I think that's how it ends. But I haven't watched it in a long time. Maybe I'll go back. At any rate, Deep Blue Sea. It's a lot of fun. It's got a great, I can't believe I haven't mentioned this. It's got a great Leo Point moment where Thomas Jane says, well, that's the answer to the riddle. What does a shark think about? The Deep Blue Sea. It's like, up. He said the name of the movie right there at the end.
Oh, wonderful.
Andrew, it feels great to be back. I'm glad to be back in the swing of things. I'm glad we got this refresher. I've got some things worked out schedule-wise. I think we're back on track. Smooth sailing. It's good. It's good to be back at it. But, you know, this hiatus gave me some time to reflect on the podcast and where we've, you know, it's been a long journey, Andrew. We've got to a point where we can have ads on our podcast. If you've had an ad inserted to the podcast, give us some feedback on that, by the way. I would like to hear how that's going, what's coming out. I got to reflect on things like, we took a month off, and I understand now why other podcasts will run like repeat episodes or best ofs in the months off, because we probably should have captured some downloads and ran some ads during that month instead of just having a month of dead air. But whatever. What are you gonna do, Andrew? But I also got to thinking about early days of this podcast. You know, originally we were all about comic book movies, and you've really got a specialty there. You know, I was able to ask you pretty much anything comic book related because you have this encyclopedic knowledge of just about all things superheroes and comic books. And now sort of like an expert, you know, our original vision for this is sort of like an expertise that you brought here. And of course, we moved on from comic book movies, and we kind of just had this shared, you know, knowledge of just filmmaking in general. But I miss that, Andrew. I miss that ability to just throw to you for a question. So I thought maybe we could bring that back. I'm thinking about having this section here called Ask Andrew, where just like the good old days, I just lob a question out at you and see what you come up with. Just kind of a fun, lighthearted thing to put at the end of this episode here, Andrew. Let's kick it off, Andrew. What should I ask, Andrew? Andrew, did Adnan Syed kill Heyman Lee?
If he didn't, someone went to great lengths to make it look like he did. And I can't imagine anybody that would do that.
There you go. There's the open and shut expertise, Andrew.
Well, I like my brain had to like the Rolodex had to spin for a second to be like, wait, who? Oh,
honestly,
right.
I thought that would stump you a lot longer than it did. It clicked for you a lot faster.
I remember listening to Serial. I remember devouring Serial, and I remember by the time I got to the end of it, I'm like, man, if he didn't do this, someone went to great lengths to make it look like he did.
I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before, but I also listened to Serial and devoured it very early in my podcast. I mean, podcasts were very
It's one of
new
the
to
only
me.
podcasts I've ever genuinely like listened to. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, believe it or not. So
I listened to a ton, but that was early on in my podcast listening. And podcasts were new to me. And I spent most of that series thinking I was listening to a scripted show. I did not realize
it came off that way. It really did. Like the tension they built, the story it was unfolding. It was genuinely extremely. I mean, it got popular for a reason. It was extremely well done. But yeah, I remember getting to the end of it and just kind of being like, don't get me wrong, there's definitely stuff that's questionable in his case, like obviously as prosecutor or as defender, things like that. But like looking at what's out there, I'm like, if he didn't do it, there are some serious things that cannot be explained. That's the only way I view it. Sorry to anybody that's, team Adnan. Like, I'm not trying.
Well, where I fall, and I think
I'm not an expert.
This is. I think my stance is probably pretty common. Is that like I don't know if he did or not, but I think what the podcast proved to me, beyond a shadow of doubt, is based on what they had. He should not have gone to prison. There was not substantial evidence to prosecute him. I think that podcast shone a light on that.
Should not have been what it was. They don't have the evidence to prove what he was convicted of. It's kind of a situation like that. So
yep.
Keep this up.
That was mostly a joke question, not the joke about something serious, but I would like to throw some questions too at the end of these episodes. Sure. They will not all be that heavy. And if you want to help me with some questions, drop some suggestions, of course, in our Discord. Join us there. We'll see what we can get Andrew's expert opinion and take on.
Because Andrew has so many takes.
Big Animal Month continues next month. We're going to be talking about Lake Placid. I think I also saw it in theaters. Man, I don't think I've rewatched that one since probably VHS. I think my last time I watched it. I know I own it. We talked about this before hitting record. We're looking at the movies we're covering without me owning them. I remember buying it, but I don't know if I revisited it. But I think I remember a thing or two. I remember Oliver Platt. I remember the old, is it Betty White, or did I just think it was Betty White because I was a little kid? I remember the old lady that feeds. I think it is Betty White, right?
I think it is Betty White. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited to go back to this one, Andrew.
Me too. I have not. I think I rewatched this after I bought it digitally when those like bundles were on sale. So I've rewatched it a few years ago, but I'm excited to watch it back and revisit it.
Join us next week for Lake Placid. And until then, just remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony, and thanks to Mitch for the music. Follow him on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy. Check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That's the only way that we grow. Follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.